Hey, it's Jared from booklive.com, here to help you find and hire the perfect musicians for your wedding. I wanted to talk a little bit about the difficulty of hiring musicians for your wedding. Unfortunately for most people, or maybe fortunately, it's their first wedding. They've never planned one before. They've only seen maybe friends or family plan them before, and they don't know what it takes to actually plan their wedding out. And this is especially true for hiring musicians. How often do you hire musicians in the rest of your life? For most people, it's zero. So this is your first time hiring a musician, and it can be scary. It can be intimidating. It can also be frustrating and take a lot of time. And of course, that time is just better spent doing other things. So if you were able to understand the perfect musician hiring process, you'd be able to save time. You'd be able to figure out exactly what you're looking for and be able to act on those decisions quickly. And then you'd be able to hire your musicians securely, knowing that they're going to show up to your wedding every time and do a great job and not have to constantly ask questions. So, I'm a musician myself. I also recently got married back in September. And so I've been on both sides of the musician hiring process for weddings. As a musician, I play hundreds of weddings each year. And then as the one getting married, I hired several groups to play my wedding, and they all fit in perfectly with my theme. It was a beautiful wedding. And so if you just follow this 3-step hiring process, you're going to have the same results. You're going to have a fantastic wedding with beautiful music that keeps you and your guests impressed and entertained. So here are the 3 steps to hiring a musician. The first step that you're going to do is the searching and narrowing process. So you're going to, just like I mentioned in one of my previous posts, you're going to perform a search process. You're going to use either friends and family to give recommendations for musicians in your area. You're going to use directories such as WeddingWire and TheKnot or booklive.com. Or you're going to search on Google to find musicians in your area and build that list. So that's your search. The next thing you need to do is narrow that list based on your preferences. So as a couple, you each have individual tastes, and you have to talk about those tastes so that you can match each other's tastes and put out the perfect entertainment that reflects you as a couple. So narrow down that list to maybe your top 3 choices for your ceremony, your top 3 choices for your cocktail hour, and your top 3 choices for your reception. So that's step 1, the search and the narrowing. The step 2 is finding price and availability. Of course, one of the biggest things about fitting in with your wedding is fitting in with your wedding's budget. So it's always nice when musicians have this instantly available, and booklive.com actually gives you instant pricing when you're performing your search, so that automatically saves you some steps. Availability as well, you got to make sure that the band and the string quartet or whatever is available for your wedding date. So when you're reaching out to them, make sure that you include your date and your time and your venue, because that's going to help with the pricing and availability process. During the pricing and availability process, some of those musicians might not be available. They might be out of your budget, so cross them off your list, and that'll help you narrow it down even further. By this point, you probably have a favorite in mind, so your favorite ceremony, string quartet. And step 3 is contracting and deposit. So any musician that's worth their weight is going to use a contract to secure the date. You use contracts to secure the other parts of your wedding, like you have a catering contract, you have a venue contract. Musicians use contracts too. In fact, the ones who are in business for a while and take this seriously use a contract. So make sure that whenever you're working with a musician that you decide to hire, you get a contract, everything in writing, date, time, venue, payment, even as far as like the planning process goes, get it all in writing. And then of course, in order to secure musicians, they will expect some sort of deposit. It varies between, I've seen flat rates of $150 for some groups, or 25% deposit, all the way up to 50% deposit. And then, of course, the closer to your date that you hire them, the higher that deposit's going to be, because the musician is taking upon some risk of saying, hey, I'm going to turn down all other gigs that I could get that day to play your date. And that's why the deposit's in place there, is because That's the risk that they're avoiding by securing your date. So if you have a contract in place and you provide the deposit, you are done booking the musician. The next step comes later. We'll talk about that in another post, but it's the music planning part, which is a lot of fun. So if you don't use a process like this, then you might actually run into problems booking the musician, like they might not show up or they might have the wrong date. That's why you use contracts. Make sure it's super clear. Or musicians might just be wishy-washy about it, and it's not their fault. It's just they don't have a clear process too. So feel free to lead them in this process. And again, that 3-step process, step 1 was the search and narrow to find musicians who fit your personality. Step 2 was getting their prices and availability. Keep that all organized with your list of musicians. Continue the narrowing process. And then finally, step 3 is get a contract signed by you and the musicians and then leave their deposit. So yeah, again, I would invite you to check out booklive.com so you can actually perform all 3 of those steps in one simple sitting. I've seen people hire musicians in under 5 minutes. Just all 3 of those steps in one session on booklive.com. So check it out. And if you have any questions, feel free to message me or my team.